Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Irenic Ref podcast. I am your host, Andrew Gross. The word irenic means aimed at or aiming towards peace, and my goal with this podcast is to try to create a bridge between coaches and officials by showing the humanity of each other in a more robust way, which isn't necessarily achievable in the minimal interactions a coach and official may experience during a game. With all that said, let's get to it. Today's guest has been a coach for 25 years. He's been a DVC Coach of the Year multiple times in both basketball and track, Region 3 AD of the Year. He's been multiple conference and conference tournament titles as a coach, district titles, region titles, you name it. He's been to the state tournament with Sioux Valley, and he has currently been at his current school for 16 years. And with that, I will introduce to you Mr. Brad DeBeer. Brad DeBeer, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, you bet, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. I forgot to mention, and I think it's awesome to note, is that you kind of have a radio broadcast background, don't you? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, a little bit. I did radio for 20 years, actually. While I was coaching, I was fortunate enough to work at Brookings Radio, and they allowed me to coach for 6 years at Sioux Valley and then 14 years at Deubrook. And now the last year, and I guess it's going on the second school year, I've been the Dean of Students and the AD and still continue to coach at Deubrook, and got out of the radio business about a year and a half ago, June the 10th, actually, a year ago. So.
Okay, is that retirement then, or is that you just stepped away and...
Yeah, must be retirement. Yeah, I still get my fix. I get my fix by doing state tournaments for South Dakota Public Broadcasting. So I get to do volleyball and both basketball, boys and girls state tournaments on TV. So I get my fix that way.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. You also get a little fix from doing some officiating. Is that correct?
You know, I do a lot of lower level officiating, not as much as I used to. I just found out actually this summer I have arthritis in my hip, so I've got an appointment this week, Friday. I think I got to get a hip replacement. So by running up and down, I'm just going to volleyball referee now, stand in the stand, and I can handle that.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I just remember one of the first times that I did meet you, it was at a Dakota State University women's basketball team camp, and I was like, man, this guy, he does a pretty good job. And then I come to find out, you're not specifically just an official, you're a coach as well. And so it's kind of nice to be interviewing someone who gets it on both sides, the best of both worlds. But we know that mostly you coach. I'm not saying that to minimize the officiating, because obviously any officiating is helpful to the game. But coaching is where you kind of live and breathe, I feel like.
Yeah, that's my full-time job. You know, refereeing, I just think that a lot of coaches should do it for the lower level stuff. I run across a lot of guys that don't do, especially the younger guys now. They're just not used to it. And I always feel like if I get on the other side, put the whistle in my mouth, put the stripes on, I can be better on the sidelines when I'm the coach and have more understanding of what's going on. Now, I like to kid some of the guys that because I do that, I get to have more say. But, of course, we know that's not true. So
yeah. That's true. So I mean, sometimes the credence is given a little bit more to someone who stepped in that position, and definitely you can understand, where we're coming from in a sense. But then we also got to realize if you're talking to us, it's probably for a good reason, because you know the way it operates as well.
Well, the older we get, the smarter we are, obviously, too. And I mean, I've been doing it for 25 years for the most part. Maybe, a couple, I helped out a little bit in junior high a couple years, so I'm probably on more like 27 years. But you learn over time. When you're young, you got a lot more energy as far as you think that what you're saying to you guys in the stripes is going to make a difference. And in the end, you got to understand what's going on out there. And my energies now over the last probably 10 years for sure, I've really changed my energies during a game to my kids. And I think that's what has to happen. Guys that referee, girls that referee, you guys don't get paid enough money to do what you do. It's just you do it for the love of the game to stay in it. We all understand that, or we should as coaches. So we need to understand our time, our energies need to be spent more on our kids. Now, I tell our kids a lot, I'm going to stand up for them if I feel like was maybe a judgment call that in my judgment was something else. But again, most referees understand that also, and we have a good conversation. We move on and we go to the next play. And if I got to tell my kids next play, then I got to tell myself that too.
Yep, no kidding. And I think that's one thing as officials we try to do as best as we can. We try to explain what we called. If there's something that isn't seen eye to eye, we try to just get to the next play. That's kind of a mantra that I've heard is how can we get to the coach the next play? And if we keep that coach at that last play, or we keep coming back to it for some weird reason, then that's all that coach is thinking about, and then it can build tension there. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I do. I see it a lot. And you know what? Again, we're all smarter when we're not the ones in that position. But I watch a lot of games. I go to a lot of games, and I find myself watching coaches interact with officials about a play that happened in the first quarter. Well, you gave them that in the first quarter. I want that back now. That's not how it works. Like, maybe it was missed. That happens. We're all human, right? We miss a call. I certainly don't call every play the right way. You can ask a lot of people. They'll give you that for sure. So you got to play in the moment. You got to move on. It's over. You're not going to go back and fix it. We're not pros, as far as like replay pros and that kind of thing. Yeah. So it's time to just move on, go to the next play. I tell my kids a lot, and I know this sounds easier than it is. If we get every rebound, we make all our shots, we don't turn the ball over, and then we still lose for whatever reason, okay, I'm probably going to have an issue somewhere. But that's never going to happen. So do your best, take care of yourself, and then let everything fall where it might.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one more thing to note. I like listening to you when you're broadcasting for SDPB because you then I think you get more into a referee mindset when you see the calls being called and the plays being made. And that's what I appreciate from you is you know that side of it. You're not like, and I don't mean to like name drop, but some big names on Division I games where they're like saying, oh, he was still moving or things like that where they don't really fully understand the rules. You, on the other hand, you understand the rules and then you're looking at it more objectively from the official's perspective.
Oh, I'm way more objective as a broadcaster when I do those games than when I've got my tie on and I'm coaching up my kids because, like I said, I'm going to fight for my kids. Sometimes I fight for my kids just to let them see that I'm in their corner to try to make them play harder, knowing, and I say this a lot, and we don't see you near as much as I used to, but I tell a lot of referees, I'm just talking to you because my kids think I'm not talking to you enough, so I'm just going to talk to you. And then we have a good conversation. We see Jerry Beers, we see Scott Mack, Pete Entringer, I know you just had him on. Yeah. We see those guys so much. We have such a great relationship, and I feel like I can have that conversation with them. So that's the part of what I've fallen in love with now in coaching is that interaction as much as my interaction with my kids on a daily basis and at games.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of kids, not directly those kids, but let's go to like your family or even just like tell me more about yourself, personal introduction here, family hobbies, different things like that you do.
Yeah, well, I turned 53 years old here next week, Monday on the 18th. So all of a sudden, I'm just an old guy. My wife, Rochelle, is a teacher and coach. She's been coaching for 27 years as well. She's a graduate of Dakota State University. She was a two-sport athlete, ran track, actually probably three if you count indoor and outdoor as two separate ones, and then was a volleyball player for 4 years. So she did all of those. My daughter graduated from Deubrook in 2019. Went to Dakota State, was fortunate enough to be part of their basketball team for the 3 years, her first 3 years, where they went to, national tournaments, things like that. She was also part of the track and field team for 4 years. And then she chose not to play basketball her senior year because she was student teaching and was down in Menno. Just thought it was just going to be tough to give both what she needed to. So we run around, chase her around doing that. Now she's a coach and a teacher, teaching 5th grade in Menno. As you said earlier, myself, I'm dean of students now at Deubrook area schools. My wife's the math teacher and teaches some reading classes. So we stay busy with everybody else's kids. We chase our own down when we can. Try to play a lot of golf. And, we live on a lake, so we spend a lot of time in the summer out on the water just enjoying our free time a little bit.
Oh, for sure. I mean, growing up, I'm originally from Hanson or Alexandria, Hanson High School. And so we've got that massive lake, Hanson there. And we would take our boat down there and go skiing or whatnot every once in a while. So I totally understand the love of the lake and hanging out at least by it.
Do your sisters out ski you or do you out ski them? Because I mean, come on, we know their athletic backgrounds, right?
Very athletic. Formerly known as the Gross Twins in the state of South Dakota. But none of us are really that great at skiing. The one who shines in the skiing realm is my dad. I mean,
Okay.
he gets up slalom and just goes, and it's pretty impressive to watch that. Besides that, I mean, I tried wakeboarding for a while and I could get up, but besides that, I was just kind of cruising along. Not many
Yeah,
tricks or anything.
for
So,
sure. Yeah, great story. This side story about your mom.
yeah.
Well, she used to referee volleyball, and when we were at Sioux Valley, I remember a time she showed up without shoes. She was wearing, I don't know, dress shoes or something, and then went to change into her official shoes and didn't have any. And we still talk about that when I run into her. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, like as much as people talk about, like, my mom was a volleyball official and whatnot, they ask me if I want to do that. I'm like, yeah, I don't see myself doing volleyball. But then it's like, that didn't even trigger me to want to do officiating for basketball. It just wasn't something that, influenced that at all. And we kind of are quite different in our approaches to officiating. But yeah, it's really interesting to see, talk about my mom as an official and then look at me and just there wasn't really an influence, but it's fun to see that, we're both in that realm or had been in that realm.
Well, and I think you see that a lot, don't you? I mean, I see a lot of, whether it's mother, son, mother, daughter, father's daughter, or whatever, across the state. Now you see some younger generations getting started, but it's like teaching and coaching. The people that are teaching and coaching now come from teachers and coaches.
Yep.
It's a lot of the same with referees. They do the same thing. We just had a in service with a gentleman from Huron that everybody would probably know, that referee. And I'll just leave his name out, but he was a principal at Huron for a number of years, and he had his daughter involved, and when she was young,
Yep.
and he talked about that at our in service, and just talked about the fact that bringing kids up in those environments, that just breeds more of that. And I don't know how we're going to find others outside of that, because not everybody's having enough kids to sustain that.
Yeah.
But it sure is neat to see that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and right there, we kind of talked about the influences in officiating, influences with that. I think you said it was a principal or former principal. But like, along with that, what influenced you to get into this coaching realm? Maybe some people that kind of stirred you into it, or was it just a passion for it? Tell us more about that.
Right out of high school, I had no idea. I was a typical immature 18-year-old that had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought, I'll go into the business world, because that's what my brother did. My dad at the time we owned a grocery store when I was little. Then he managed a bowling alley for 26 years in Brookings. And so that's what I knew, was the business side. But deep down, I loved coaching. I coached a lot of younger youth teams and just was a part of it all the time. So I had that kind of inward desire to want to do it. But then I come from a coaching family. I mean, my dad coached for 10 years and decided to get out. He was a college athlete, got into coaching and teaching. He got out of it. I have two uncles, Andy Nelson, who is in the Minnesota Coaching Hall of Fame, one of the most winningest coaches before he passed away at Lake Benton High School over in Minnesota. Did some coaching in South Dakota way back before I was even a thought. My Uncle Roger, a lot of people know my Uncle Roger Nelson. He refereed, he coached, he was an administrator for felt like 100 years, you know what I mean? That's what he did. And until he passed away, I have my cousin Kim is the head football coach down at Sioux Falls Roosevelt. My cousin Terry now coaches girls again in Britain. He's retired and came back to the sidelines, but he was at Shining Butte. He was at Chamberlain. He's been all over the place. I have a cousin, Tom Nelson, who was in Scotland for many years, and then he went on and finished his career teaching at T. So just in the family, I have a cousin, Peg, who taught and coached for, I don't know, probably 20, 25 years. So just a lot of coaches and teachers in the family, and that's just the life we've lived for the most part, as far as my cousins and I.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, just in the family, just that influences, but also just the stirring on and seeing maybe success from a lot of your relatives also is like, man, I think I can do that as well. I've got that ethic, I've got that drive, that passion, and maybe that's something I can do as well.
Well, and it certainly gives us something to talk about at family reunions too. Instead of just, hey, I haven't seen you for a while, we're always watching each other's events. I know I'll run into my cousin Kim at Howard Wood every year,
Yep.
and he'll be working or something. and he's got to check in on how the team did, how it did last year. You know, he's always, well, I was watching scores and this happened. So we kind of do that, keep in touch. It's a great way to keep in touch with family, and you know, you build that family out and out and out with all the people that you come across.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have an uncle who lives in Kansas, longtime basketball official in some college realms, I think mostly high school. But yeah, every time he comes up, we talk about rules, rule changes, just games that I had the past year. And I get that connection between family members when you're talking about the games or the officiating or whatnot. And it kind of just draws you closer, even when you don't necessarily think you'd have a connection with someone.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, one day I don't know, when I was at the radio station, you put a song on. So what are you going to do? You sit there and think about weird things. And I was just thinking of all of our family that had coached and things and put the years together. And I mean, we were approaching 300 years of experience in our family. And I mean, immediate family, as far as first cousins, uncles, or myself and my wife, that kind of thing. So it's just crazy to think about that and all the lives you get to be a part of, and have been around different people, and you know, you end up running across the same people in some of the same circles.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of fun when you look at that stuff, and it also kind of can lead in, like you were talking about when you're talking about different things, it leads into stories. And so like maybe give me a few stories of whether they're fun, they're weird, they're kind of kooky or anything like that of some of the your coaching experience. Like, is there some fun ones that stick out, or there's some weird ones that stick out that are like really like ingrained into your brain?
Well, I mean, I guess first one that stands out is one of my early days of coaching. I was an assistant with the boys at Sioux Valley. I was the junior high coach, but then I sat the bench with the high school, and Bill Vincent was in his early years coaching the boys there. And we were on the bench, and we were playing in I think it was a district game, because there were still districts back then, at Frost Arena. And Gene Struck refereeing, I remember. And, you know, we're dressed up and we're wearing our nice ties and everything, and jump up for a quick bang play and kind of kick my shoe on the floor, kind of like, I thought that was travel. And they weren't laced shoes, they were just slip-ons. And it actually ended up at about half court at Frost Arena. Oh, no. So that was kind of neat. Just for whatever reason, Gene Struck was at the other end, and he just kind of looked at me like, "What are you doing picking your shoe up? What just happened?" Never really saw it. Went back, sat down, total accident. So that was kind of funny. I learned to wear shoes that tie after that all the time. I never put a shoe on that doesn't tie. So, you have that kind of experience, just experiences with kids and wins and losses and those types of situations that I remember. There's hundreds of those types of games that you go through. Yeah. I think, referee interaction, I've become really good friends with Paul Roselle out of Warner, Paul. And, it was a state tournament. I was coaching Sioux Valley girls. We were in a battle with West Central. It became a battle. They blew us out in the first half. But second half was a really good basketball game. And you know how it is. You're a little frustrated because we didn't play very well the first half. And we got a great picture of me on the sidelines, hands on my hips, directing a comment toward him. And the starography guy had a picture of it. And he blew that up, Paul did, and hung it in his basement. And his son, growing up, always asked, "Dad, who is this guy?" Ran into him at a team camp in Aberdeen one time. He brought his kid over, and he says, "Hey, this is that guy that was yelling at your dad." So, we have that conversation. And I had to tell the son, I said, "I was not yelling at your dad. I told him to talk to his partner about a call he missed." So it worked out great. So, stories like that, those kinds of stories are the ones that keep me coming back. That's great stuff.
Yeah, so that kind of touched on one of the memorable interactions with an official. Is there any other memorable interactions with an official? Is there one maybe you've had with me that was memorable? I mean, you can grill me as hard as you want if you have one.
Well, I mean, the one that stands out, I ran into your sister after the game, and she's like, "Man, you really kept your cool." I said, "Well, what are we supposed to do? Change it?" It was a bang play, if you remember, at Hanson at the Corn Palace Classic, and our kid got a steal, took it at the basket really hard, and their girl slid in, whether she was there or wasn't. I mean, it was that close. He could have called it. If I'm not mad, the other coach is probably a little upset, kind of thing. It's one of those. So I just remember I actually have a hole in the knee of my pants because when you made the call, I went to my knees like, no. And it wasn't really like I was yelling at you, no. I was just like, that was a chance to win the game, no, and it went away. And so I still have the pants, and it's not a big hole. It's just like a burn mark. And every time I put them on, the kids are like, are those the pants you were wearing at the Corn Palace? I said, yes, they are. So it's just a reminder.
No, and that's the one that I remember very vividly as well. And it's funny you mentioned my sister because as soon as I knew she was there, so I texted her as soon as I had made the not as soon as I made the call. That'd be weird. But I got back to the locker room. And I texted her. I said, do you think that she was set? And that, or something to that effect. And she's like, that was a bad call. And I'm just like, oh my gosh.
I love that girl. That girl is one of my favorites.
And it's funny. She, I think she's like, she understands the rules well enough. There's also times where, I'm like, well, that's the rule, so I have to call it that way, where she would disagree. But in that situation, I was like, yeah, my insides just said, oh, that didn't feel good. But as soon as my hand went up, I was going the other way, and I had to keep going with it. And, as I had Pete on the last call, he's like, as long as you hit it hard and you sell it, the coaches are either going to believe you or they're going to have to believe. Like, he kind of said something to that effect. And
that's the thing. If it would have been in the middle of the second quarter and that play happens, you don't remember that call.
No.
Those are a dime a dozen, right?
Yep.
It just happened that it was 5 seconds left in the game, chance. We still had a chance after that, and we missed a bunny, kind of a lob play that we ran. Yeah. We still could have won the game. So, again, did it end up being the call? Well, it was a call. I mean, it happened. So, for sure.
Well, and it's really funny that, I do some baseball umpiring as well, and I find it's interesting that a missed strike call seems to be more consequential in baseball than a foul call. And not saying, like, obviously if you call a foul with 0 seconds on the clock, that has an impact on the game more than a strike. But in the same regard, if it's a foul, it's a foul, and the players dictated that sort of situation.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, baseball, a strike is totally, was it on the corner? Did it just miss the corner? Was it, was it high, was it low? So I get that.
Yep. And so I was curious if that one's still stuck in your brain, because that one, it's still, I think I still have the video on my phone, and I occasionally go back and I want to be like, I look so close, and I just can't erase it.
What cracks me up is the number of texts I got, because it was on, it was broadcast live. It was a streamed game. The number of texts I got because people asking me, one, did I think it was really a foul? But two, if you didn't think it was, how'd you keep it together and not get teed up? And I'm just like, well, I don't know what I was supposed to do. Like, it wasn't going to change the call. I can ask you, and you can tell me. I'm not going to say, well, you should change it now, because you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And again, when I was 27, I'd have probably argued that for a long time.
Sure.
But when you're 45, you understand that it is what it is.
Yep. You've got like probably 15 more games and your voice needs to last dozen. No, I'm just kidding. But
yeah.
Anyway, I appreciate you not going ballistic on me there. But yeah, it is interesting the times that that you can, what's it called? Just interact with each other in a positive way. But
sure.
Anyway,
well, don't you think too, in the game of basketball, especially now, we see it's so out there. Everybody has access to watch basketball.
Yeah.
6 nights a week, 7 nights a week sometimes. And it's almost year round anymore. So everybody thinks they know something about basketball, whether they're mad at the coach for running that play or they're mad at the ref for not calling that. And that's what it's become. 30 years ago, you didn't have as much. You didn't see as much basketball. So you could kind of get away with, hey, this is the rule. This is how we call it. Now everybody thinks they know something about it. So they all think they have an opinion.
Yeah. And it's even better, though, for officials, because we can look at games and see plays and do things different than even in the past.
Yeah, you can fix it for sure.
There's a blessing and a curse at the same time there.
Yeah.
Speaking kind of on the same lines of rules, black and white, what's a rule that that was added in the time that you've been coaching that you're like, yeah, that was been a good addition? And then also on the flip side, what's one you're like, I don't really like that rule and I wish it maybe was modified or just kind of gotten rid of?
I don't know if it's necessarily a rule per se, but the shot clock, bringing the shot clock in was brilliant for basketball, for high school basketball. Yeah. I'm a total proponent. It has changed the game for the better. It's taught kids to react quicker, think the game faster, understand situations late in a shot clock. You can play defense differently because you only got to play it for 30 seconds as hard as you can, and you're going to have an opportunity to get the ball back. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that, I don't know if that's necessarily a rule. I guess it is. Yeah. That's a big one that I think was huge for basketball. On the flip side, I don't know. I used to be a big, we trap a lot. We play a lot of full court with all my teams. I believe in girls basketball, that if you've got athletes, you can find ways to be successful that way. And, I don't know how much it's called, honestly, anymore. But when they put in you can't have your foot out of bounds, it's automatically a block, whether you're standing there for 3 days or you just slid in. I mean, I guess, I don't know. We use that to our advantage. Just get your foot out of bounds. Where are they going to go? They got to go around you. Yep. When they said you can't do that anymore, you had to teach it a different way. Yep. So it was a little harder. I don't necessarily know that it's a bad rule because I don't know how much it gets called, quite honestly. Yeah, correct. Because most of the time a kid is probably either moving anyway to get to that spot, so that's why you get the block called. It's not because they're standing out of bounds. Yep. But I think most rules are, for the most part, implemented for the better. I think it takes some getting used to for some of the rules. Yep. And we haven't had a lot of big rule changes the last 3-4 years, so it's been kind of nice to be able to get in a flow with your teams and teach them as seventh graders, and then when they come to you as sophomores and juniors, you're not having to reteach a rule. So that's been good. Yeah. And following up with that, what is your thoughts on some upcoming rules that we've got? The 5 fouls, shooting 2, and I'm trying to remember the other one here. Anyway, some of the thoughts on those. Well, the no 1-and-1, I think is great. I watched my daughter the last 4 years or 3 years play college basketball, and I've watched tons of other college basketball since. When college women went to 4 10-minute quarters and then put that rule in, that game cleaned up so much, and it became so much more fun to watch. I remember SDSU prior to that going to watch games, and granted, they were fun to watch because they were good players, but it was painful to watch in the fact that it was so herky-jerky. There was no flow in the game. And I think it's I think it's great. I think it teaches us to teach our kids about defense, that fouls matter. Like, you don't go out there and just get 7 fouls real quick in the first quarter, because now they're shooting 2 the whole time. And then what I do like about it is, okay, we learned our lesson. We start our next 8 minutes. We go back to zeros. Now let's play better defense here. So I think it's great. I love the rule. I think it's going to be fun. Perfect. Last question I'm going to ask, kind of off the cuff, is for newer and younger officials, what is something that you would recommend to them, maybe not to do as they approach a coach, or maybe something to do as they approach a coach in any situation? Well, again, communication is key. In the 99% of my interactions with officials, I'm a communications guy, so I'm going to talk. Whether they want to hear me or not, I'm going to talk to them. But for the most part, I have seen young guys get in and they're a little leery because they hear some war stories. There's some horror stories about coaches attacking them verbally from the minute the ball's tipped. And I don't think that's how it is from most coaches. So communication early, and don't be afraid to stop and say, hey, here's what I saw. This is why I called it. I can't argue with you when you tell me this is how I saw it. You know, if you implement the rule wrong, I could probably argue. Yeah. Because you saw it this way or whatever, what am I supposed to say? That stops me in my tracks. I also like veteran officials who let me have a say early. And then when they've had enough of me, they walk by and say, okay, that's enough. It isn't stop and point. And, it's just, hey, I've had enough now. I mean, I'm going to throw a name out. James Benning and I have this relationship for a long time. And I've known James from, basically when he was in high school. Yeah. And he lets me say a lot of things to him about questioning calls. And the minute I say maybe something too close to the line, he lets me know that's probably enough. You're probably close. Now let's just stop. And I know it's time to get out of it, because you know what's happened in that time? My kids have started to play like I'm coaching. And they're whining, and now I'm whining, and now it's no fun for anybody. And so we get out of it, and you got to go back to coaching the game. So I think that's a big thing, is communication for young people getting in. Don't be afraid to visit with the coaches in the appropriate moments. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So, and there's a fine line in finding how to do that. I think my biggest problem as a younger official was I was going to tell the coach exactly what happened, and I was right. And sometimes that doesn't come out correct either. So you do want to come to the coach and tell them what you saw, but being open to understand that they may have had a different angle and they saw something as well. And I know for a fact when I was doing 2-man to start, oh my goodness, like there's angles I couldn't see, and the coach probably had the best angle and had the foul call. But yeah, I that was one thing that I would say as a younger official. I had too much pride in what I thought I saw versus like just stating what I thought I saw. Well, maybe not what I thought I saw, but what I saw in that play that made me call it, and then just letting the coach talk to me and being like, okay, I guess if that's what you saw, then I missed it, or we're just not going to see eye to eye because that's not what I saw. You know, that sort of approach.
No, and I like what you said earlier in talking about, you know, what you saw, make the call. I think Pete said it to you. Make the call, and whether right or wrong, you're going to miss some calls. We all know that. It happens. We all are. You either just get caught out of position or whatever. But the minute, in my mind, a young referee wavers, like, now the coach is going to they're going to go. And so, boom, I got this. Here's my call. This is what it is. We're going this way. You know, maybe I missed it, but that's what the call is right now. Let's move on. We got 14 minutes to play still in this game. We got a lot of time to fix that. So
awesome. Yeah. Thanks again, Brad, for stopping on the show today. I hope people check this out and continue to watch the Irenic Ref podcast. Here again, I am Andrew Gross. This was Brad DeBeer, and thank you again, Brad, for stopping in.
Appreciate it, Andrew. And I like what you're doing with this program. I think it's great for people out there to see. We get it out to some of our fans, let them see it. I think we're going to see behavior change as well. It's on us as coaches to reflect what we want people to act like towards referees. So I think stuff like this is a great way to start it.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I hope that it goes both ways as well. So, again, thanks, Brad. We will talk to you hopefully this year at a game or so.
We will see you somewhere. Appreciate it. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.